All right, welcome back to the podcast. First time I've had this gentleman on the podcast, and I'm excited to do it. He is a voice you hear everywhere. He's a great guy to talk to about so many things. He is Anthony Herron. You hear him on the Big Ten Network, and then Bears stuff. He's on The Score. He does the post-game show on Sundays, as well as other times during the week. And you can also hear him on Fox 32 covering the Bears there. And he joins me now. Anthony Bill Zimmerman, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, this will be fun. And let's not bury the lead. Let's just start with quarterback play because that's what everybody's talking about. And I was thrilled with what I saw from Tyson Bagent, but I was also thrilled from where my expectations were. And my expectations were that I felt he had the makings to be a great backup quarterback, and be a guy you could rely on. And to me, that's exciting. You find an undrafted free agent who can be a backup quarterback. That's exciting. Now, we as Chicago Bears fans like to really shoot for the moon. And you're hearing some people talking about replacing Fields and all this. And that's a little too much for me. But where were you, after watching Tyson Bagent against the Raiders?
I was thoroughly impressed. I was with, and the Division II aspect of his resume is always going to be there. But in the end, he is now a rookie quarterback in the National Football League. So once it gets to the point where he makes the team, he shows he has the requisite physical abilities to compete at this level and the aptitude for it. Then just evaluating him, I think, still on a curve because he's a rookie quarterback making his first start. And I thought through that lens, he performed really well. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot. And I thought that was the right approach to take with a rookie QB making his first start. But what they did ask him to do, he performed really well. What we saw in some preseason action that then also got to play out in a regular season game against Minnesota is that he is a guy with a quick release, a guy who's decisive as a passer, and who seems, at least up to this point, to be pretty accurate as a passer as well. And all those things were on display against the Raiders the other day. Now, what was, I think the number was like just over 2 yards of air yards on average. Yeah, I mean, all right. So you're not asking a quarterback to do a whole lot. That's a glorified handoff, essentially. But there were some moments that stood out, some key third downs, especially multiple times in the first half, where two things happened. One, he took the snap from center and he was decisive and delivered it on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7. And the offensive line held up as well. I thought, especially sometimes where they even did leave Max Crosby one-on-one with offensive tackles like Darnell Wright, and they were able to do enough. Now, Crosby got a sack in the game, and he's Max Crosby. He's going to get to the QB on occasion, but then you have a passing attack working in concert with an offensive line where the quarterback gets it out quickly and in rhythm, and the offensive line did enough to hold up. And as much as anything, when you're looking to insulate a young QB, you need to run the ball at a high level. Man, did they do that. You need to protect at a high level. Situationally, they were able to make that happen. And then the defense shutting down the Raiders in the way that they did. That Raiders offense did very little throughout much of the game against the Bears D. So you're not chasing at any point in the game as well. I think back to the early portion of the season where the opponent's putting points on the board, and the Bears are trailing, and then that dictates terms to you for how you're comfortable operating offensively. So there was so much about the overall control of the game that the Bears had that really allowed them to have Tyson Bagent play sort of within himself. I thought that worked out really well.
Yeah, I think it worked really well. And you brought up a couple of the key plays that Bagent had, and I think that's, you almost, like on social media and everything, you're almost seeing two juxtapositions about this is, give this guy a chance. He's got great potential. And other people like, come on, relax. This is still Justin Fields' team. And both points are fair, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. Everything was checkdowns and dink and dunks and screens, because I did think, like you said, coming from Division II, playing in the NFL, that jump, yes, he got preseason and he got a second half, but that jump, I mean, I can't even imagine, you hear about the jump from, like Big Ten, like yourself to NFL, and how much people go so much faster. Like Division II to that is in a whole world. The two plays to me that really stood out, and he had a couple good decisions running or whatever, but in terms of throwing, the Tyler Scott conversion on 3rd down, which I believe was probably his third option. He looked right, looked left, then hit over the middle. And there was another one to DJ Moore. It might have been his first read, but it was another 3rd down play, and he threaded the needle and just put it within 2 inches of where it needed to be for DJ to make that catch. So yes, if he's going to be able to have more sustained success, he's going to have to get intermediate throws and potentially deep throws. And we don't know how good his arm is for that. But for what he's able to do in the short and the quick game, there's a lot of positives there that they can build upon.
I think that's the thing where when the Bears are able to stay ahead of the chains more frequently than not on offense because of a great run game, and when the defense is able to hold the opponent down, then you can operate within, the sort of the confines, the constraints the offense sort of put on itself the other day, and it can work really well for a bunch of quarterbacks. Like the way the game bookended to me the other day, the counterpart, Brian Hoyer, like you probably remember, Bill, there were stretches towards the end of Jay Cutler's career with the Bears where people had just gotten tired of looking at Jay Cutler, let alone feeling like his talent wasn't being realized.
It calls for Jimmy Clausen. That's never
yes, Jimmy Clausen. There was a game where Matt Barkley was trending on Twitter because he got a couple of first downs. And certainly Brian Hoyer was one of these guys as well, where there are times where Twitter was just ablaze. Twitter was ablaze with folks singing the praises of Brian Hoyer because he got some time in his time as a backup behind Jay Cutler. And the offense did, for short stretches, look rhythmic and look different than Cutler usually operated as a Bears QB. In the end, it wasn't sustainable for high-level success as a starter, but I think if nothing else, that's really something to aspire to for Tyson Bagent. Coming from where he came from, if you can be a guy 15 years in the league, I mean, Brian Hoyer had, like they mentioned it on the broadcast, 4 consecutive games of 300-plus yard passes and 0 interceptions. Not every quarterback is created the same. Tyson Bagent is a very different style of quarterback from Justin Fields. A very different style of quarterback than Patrick Mahomes or than Jalen Hurts or, Josh Allen and a lot of the tops in the league. So him being decisive, accurate, and in that short to intermediate area, there's a version of that can work in the NFL. The ceiling isn't as high as guys with some of the more physical attributes there and who are going to be able to gun it down the field and who may hold the ball looking for the big play because they know they can extend it and all those types of things. But in the end, can you have success with this? Everything around you really has to go well. But we saw that the other day, and the Bears pulled it off.
Yeah, and like you said, things need to go well, and you did mention how well the running game looked. And, when Bagent's getting the ball out that quickly, you don't have to ask the offensive line to do too much in the pass rush. But I wanted to ask you about one particular offensive lineman because I think he's really the engine that makes this offensive line go a lot, and that's Tevin Jenkins, who he misses too much time. It's hard, when he's constantly out, but when he's on, he plays so well. And when they made the announcement that Tevin Jenkins was going to move back over to right guard for this game, I didn't like it. I wanted him to stay at left guard where he was getting comfortable again. But, having him and Wright next to each other on the right side, I did do some numbers looked at some numbers on Pro Football Focus, and you can't argue with these results. When they ran it to the left, 3.3 yards a carry. When they ran it to the right, I think it was 6.2 yards a carry when they're running behind Jenkins and Wright. I mean, I think Tevin Jenkins is so great for this offense. His pass blocking has been great this year. He's a bulldozer in the run game. And he's the type of guy, if you keep him out there for 14, 15 games a season, he is truly a difference maker.
And that's been the tough thing, like you referenced, Bill, just throughout his career to this point, just being able to sustain health enough to be on the field. You draft a guy as an offensive tackle. The thought was usually there in his draft evaluation that if it doesn't work out at tackle, you can move him into guard. That happened pretty quickly when the new regime came in Chicago, but that was a preseason, an off season where he was all banged up last year when Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus first came in. But as he's been at guard, there's some special traits that are there for a guy to operate on the interior of an offensive line. And with an offense that operates like the Bears want to operate, where you will, in a lot of situations, lead with the ground attack. And you're not going to be this volume passing outfit at this point in your development. Your development with either quarterback, your development with any of these combinations of offensive line that we've seen. There's already been 6 different starting groups out of the 7 games this season. I think, 15 out of the 24 games that Matt Eberflus has coached the Bears, there's been a different starting crew. They just haven't been able to sustain any continuity up front. And I'm sure you know it, Bill. I mean, O-line is the spot amongst any position group in football where you want that continuity. So Tevin Jenkins staying on the field, being able to work in concert with Darnell Wright on one side, with a consistent center on the other. It seems to me there's no doubt that Darnell Wright, when healthy, has got to be out there. Tevin Jenkins, when healthy, has got to be out there. Nate Davis, when healthy, has got to be out there. Braxton Jones. When he's healthy, he's got to get back in there at left tackle. The quandary will be, because Cody Whitehair can play, he can block, he just can't snap. That's the problem. So are you forced to play Lucas Patrick at center just to make sure you can get the snap from center to quarterback? And then from there, what do you do? Is it Cody Whitehair? Do you put Tevin Jenkins back over there? But Cody Whitehair can block people. That's never been the issue. Whenever he gets moved into center, the snap's going all over the place, and it's hard to really get a play going when that's the case.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk moving him over there. And I mean, it's been a problem his whole career, but it really was bad with the Vikings there.
Yeah.
But let me just ask you really quick about center. I wasn't planning on it, but it just kind of popped in my head because I'm really curious about Dan Feeney. And I'm not saying he is a superstar, but they did send a 6th-round pick for him. I know there were some more questions when they did that with health. They weren't sure about Whitehair and Patrick, and Kramer was banged up, so they didn't even know who really could play center. But, we are in a spot where Whitehair's been struggling with the snaps. I think Lucas Patrick overall has kind of been struggling kind of this whole season in terms of getting in front of guys, in terms of the success rate he needs to be having. You tell me, I mean, you've played in the league. Why not give Dan Feeney a shot at center or even Doug Kramer a shot at center? Why don't they try and mix it up there? I know it's an important position with line calls and all, but, we're kind of talking about these guys. Nate Davis gets healthy. Braxton Jones gets healthy. Finally could really have the pieces of this offensive line together, but they still just have that big question mark in the middle.
Well, I think I would start with Lucas Patrick may have had his best game as a Bear the other day. Now, the Washington game was, he played pretty well. They had to move some guys around. He was out of the lineup. But as far as just being and staying in the lineup consistently, Patrick played the whole game and I think had the best game of his Bears career the other day. So there's multiple things. One, the performance of those in front of you. And two, Dan Feeney's been banged up even in the short time he's been in Chicago. So do you want to add another wrinkle into it and sort of force feed another guy into the lineup when there's at least an option here that you can try to say, if we do have relative health at a variety of spots, then we can pick and choose from guys who've at least been in the lineup for us this season where we know what we're dealing with, as opposed to a Dan Feeney, who has certainly played in the league, there's no doubt. So as a backup option, if you have to go to him, then there can be some relative confidence there. But, I think for Lucas Patrick, last season, he really never got to play center because he banged his hand up. Right. That was the position he was signed to play. He comes in this year, and there were some difficult moments early in the season, but I think, coming off the best game he's had there at center, and to me, I don't think it should be lost. 3 out of the last 4 games, in my opinion, Luke Getsy has called the style of offense that benefits the Bears. Those 2 games against Denver and then Washington back-to-back weeks, we saw a bunch of misdirection in the backfield, both for the pass game and the run game. We saw movement of the launch point. We saw quick game. We saw a lot of what, even when Justin Fields was at quarterback against those 2 teams where the Bears were lighting up the scoreboard, he's throwing back-to-back 4-touchdown games. The Vikings game, for whatever reason, the passing attack became very pocket-oriented again. That's just not what suits this group. It certainly doesn't suit Justin Fields. It doesn't suit this offensive line. With Tyson Bagent back in at quarterback, not only was there quick game, but we did see some sprints, some boots. You're not going to see QB run with Tyson Bagent, but the launch point was on the go. That aids the offensive line. It takes mental pressure off of your quarterback. It takes physical pressure off of your pass protection, because I know this as an old defensive lineman. We used to even face it. We played the Colts, and Peyton Manning was running sprints and boots and changing tempos, going hurry up on occasion. When you're not able to get into a rhythm as a pass rush, it takes some of the starch out of you. So I think all those things factor in. But I thought 3 out of the last 4 games, Luke Getsy ran the type of offense that suits where this Bears offense is at in its development. Minnesota was the one example to me. That's the one outlier where you just have a quarterback sitting in the pocket consistently, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
All right, well, let me get over to the defensive side of the ball, because I want to ask you a couple things over there as well, because the defense really looks like it's really starting to turn the corner. They showed flashes of it against Denver, couldn't sustain it for a full game. And then, of course, more against Washington, and, really played well against the Vikings here and the Raiders as well. What is it to you? Is it the health of the secondary? Is it Eberflus's game plan and play calling? What is it that have you seen the last 3 weeks that has really started putting this defense on the right track?
I believe the health of the secondary certainly tops the list there. And even in the initial games where Eberflus had to take over as defensive coordinator, Bill, he was just in a spot where the secondary was so banged up as he had to suddenly, kind of on a dime, take over as defensive play caller, that not only is he having to figure out, all right, how do I really want to put my spin on this thing? And, he was involved in the defensive game planning already, even when Alan Williams was doing it. But to actually call it while you're also the head coach and you're also trying to see, make sure I got my fingers on the pulse of the offense as well. I would imagine it takes a couple of weeks for Matt Eberflus just to make that transition that he wasn't expecting to have to make. Then you're into the flow of it, and you get this uber talented secondary finally starting to get healthy. And so now we start to see not only can he go more man coverage on the outside, because we saw right off the jump, Tyreek Stevenson was matched up one-on-one against Davante Adams. Jaylen Johnson, who I mentioned bookends earlier, the Jaylen Johnson bookend with a Roquan Smith game from last year, that really stands out to me from a storyline perspective. We get into that in a moment if you want. But the health of the secondary overall, where you can say, we feel good about going man with both corners. We have an exceptional nickel right now defending the slot in Kyler Gordon. They asked Gordon to do so much as the Swiss Army knife of their secondary. And then you got the enforcer on the back end of Jaquan Brisker. It's a talented secondary. It's a relatively young secondary. And now you feel good about your blitz package when you want to use that. But even if your pass rush isn't going to get home, which it's not, I think we can accept that at this point. You just don't have guys who get after the quarterback one-on-one, but they can hold up long enough in the secondary on the back end with or without the blitz to at least give you an extra beat to get home with the rush.
All right. Well, while we're talking secondary, Jaylen Johnson, you brought him up, and really not just a fantastic game. He finally got the interceptions. I know those are sometimes a little fluky for a defensive back. Mm-hmm. It's kind of surprising. He's only had one in his career before Sunday, but just not just that. I saw, highest graded coverage corner by Pro Football Focus. His quarterback rating against is super low. He's really putting it together. Another guy who, misses a couple games here or there every season, but he's really coming into his own. He made it very clear after that interception that he wants to get paid by the Chicago Bears. And, certainly, in terms of holdovers from the Ryan Pace era, Kmet's already been paid. There's not too many other guys left I think they might want to extend, but Jaylen Johnson certainly looks like a guy that, even with a little bit of an injury risk, is a guy you want to keep around for years to come.
I completely agree, man. The level of play that we've seen from Jaylen Johnson really throughout his career has been pretty stellar. I called a bunch of his games when he was in college at Utah. He for whatever reason, and I can go into a couple of the reasons why, he's never been a guy with big interception numbers, but it's not for lack of ball skills. There are some defensive backs, there are some corners who their ball skills are a little bit suspect, and they just don't pick the ball off at a high level, partly because of that. Jaylen Johnson's style of coverage, I don't think, really leads to a lot of interceptions, because he's willing to try and bait quarterbacks, but then the drive phase, he's not necessarily as special in what we term as the drive phase, where you transition out of your pedal and then react downhill towards the football. He doesn't get there at a rate that really allows him to completely undercut a pass with a lot of velocity on it. But he knows that. He has a sense for that. He knows himself. He reads routes so well. And I would comp him maybe a little bit with like a Darrelle Revis, where Darrelle Revis, he just had an exceptional sense for things and coverage. He didn't have huge interception numbers all throughout his career either. I'm not saying he's a future Hall of Famer, but in style, I would throw a Darrelle Revis comp in there by comparison to a Deion Sanders type, where just the drive phase and the speed, the recovery is off the charts. That's not Jaylen Johnson. He doesn't have the longest limbs in the world either. So having super long arms can enhance that as a corner. But his cover ability, his reading of routes, his confidence on the outside, whether he gets beat or not, is just out of this world. So I really do hope the Bears find a way to keep him around. And the other bookend I was referencing there, because the last game that the Bears had won at home before this last game was September 25th last year against the Houston Texans. That was the last time the Bears had won at Soldier Field. That was the last splash game of Roquan Smith as Bears linebacker. 16 tackles, couple tackles for loss, a game-clinching interception to close the show. And then very similarly, afterwards, when asked about it, he's like, yeah, I think I deserve to get paid. I think I've earned that right, and this is the type of game that really should cement it. Similar sort of vibe from Jaylen Johnson here with the game we just saw. And I hope it's not the last splash game we see from Jaylen Johnson at Soldier Field, because in a similar space with Roquan, he's a player who's just beginning to enter his prime. And to me, it's different than last season as well. One, Jaylen Johnson, a more premium position than an off-ball linebacker, but then also you're beyond the tear down phase. This is where Ryan Poles should be starting to try and stockpile talent that can be a part of success in the future. Now, I don't know what Jaylen Johnson is asking for. I don't know if he's asking to be the top paid corner in the sport or what. I don't think he's necessarily that guy. He's not the best in the business, but man, does he deserve a big payday because he's one of them.
Yeah, he's really coming into his own this year at the right time for him. I want to ask you a couple things about college, but before I do, just one other one on the Bears. And you being a former D-line guy, I want to talk about that because I know you said the pass rush isn't great. We all can see that, and it doesn't look like it's going to get much better this season until they spend on it or use draft capital on it. But one guy I do want to ask you about is Davon Dexter, because I think that's a guy who has steadily been improving, been getting some more opportunities. And is, he's not showing up on the stat pages per se, but he's really starting to be more of a disruptor in there. And I think starting to come into the role that Eberflus and Poles saw for him at when they drafted him. What have you seen out of Davon Dexter this year?
I agree. I think that's a great assessment of where he's at in his development. And frankly, even Zach Pickens, I would put in that similar regard as well. And it was interesting. I keep mentioning bookends. I hadn't even really thought about the bookend of Bilal Nichols. Bilal Nichols was on the field for the Raiders the other day, and he was also a guy similarly to Davon Dexter, who in college was a two-gapper, a match step guy who wasn't in a system that really penetrated very frequently. He was pretty quickly able to transition, though, in his time with the Bears into being a guy that could get upfield, that could anticipate the snap count, even though that wasn't the scheme that he was in college. Dexter, his transition hasn't been automatic or easy here, but we're seeing some progress that I think is showing up there with at least moving the line of scrimmage back, not just, sort of trying to occupy blockers as he might have been accustomed to in college, getting that first step, closing on the blocker, closing on the pocket, and forcing the line of scrimmage to have to belly, impacting the line of scrimmage. I thought Zach Pickens really showed some nice moments of that over the last couple of weeks, but especially some moments against the Raiders the other day as well. So both these guys on the interior of the Bears defensive front are starting to show some signs, and Dexter was the higher of the two draft picks, probably overall has the more impressive physical profile. But I think each of them really is starting to show some development. Now, neither one right now looks like your definitive three technique of the future and like a hellacious sort of defense where they're just flying into the backfield every snap, but both look like developmental pieces that I think are starting to show some promise here.
All right. Now, I know you do stuff for the Big Ten Network and do plenty of college football. So I want to ask you about this because it feels like we might be headed towards a little bit of a Big Ten flavor here for the Chicago Bears draft. And obviously it's going to depend on where they end up. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation that's impossible to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
All right.
And that is, let's say that the Bears keep playing better because I think they've kind of turned a corner and they win 6-7 games, whatever it might be. So they're pick 9-10, whatever it might be. Carolina Panthers, let's say they finish with the third pick. I think when it finishes in the top two and people say Williams or May, you can't pass on, you're going to have to move on from Fields, that kind of thing. Okay. If they finish with the third pick, and I know Justin Fields still has a half a season in front of him, and that's going to be an important half season. That's why I said this is an impossible question to really answer. But if you're Ryan Poles and you're sitting with the third pick and you can pick the third quarterback in this draft, whether it's J.J. McCarthy from Michigan or Shedeur Sanders or whoever it might be, I think that's a definite debate piece right now. But then you've also got Marvin Harrison and you've got Olu Fashanu, Penn State tackle and obviously Ohio State wide receiver. Either one of those guys, the idea of Fashanu and Wright, protecting your quarterback on each end for 10 years, that's an incredible idea.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison with DJ Moore. I mean, that's certainly going to elevate any quarterback. What do you do for the Chicago Bears there? You can cement the offensive line. You can get potentially a unicorn wide receiver, or, do you move on and try and find the third best quarterback and reset the quarterback clock?
There's so many levels to this, Bill.
Right?
So I would say if it's the Luke Getsy offense with Justin Fields running it that we saw against Denver and Washington, even if it's not necessarily 4 touchdown passes in those games, but if there is pocket of the movement, called QB run, some of those things that affect the eye discipline that frankly just look more creative than what we saw the bulk of the first month of the season, than what we saw against the Vikings, where you use the athlete that is Justin Fields. And when he's on the move, all eyes on the defense go to him. And that's an advantage that the Bears haven't utilized in too many of their games this season. But if it's that, then even a Daniel Jones situation where he goes into a lame duck year without picking up the 5th-year option. I'm comfortable with that over the 3rd or 4th or worst best, QB prospects in this draft, because you do have an opportunity. Olu Fashanu is an exceptional. He's a future Pro Bowler as a left tackle in the National Football League. So you bring that in for some potential competition there. Marvin Harrison Jr., we already know his dad's in the Hall of Fame. Somehow he's a foot taller than his dad. He's even faster than his dad. He's built like a Power Ranger and plays like an action figure. And he's got hands like they got some kind of magnetic grip in them, like you would see from Magneto in some kind of superhero movie. So, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., there's some seasons you go back in the day, I don't know how frequently a receiver goes top 2, but man, the guy's going to be special in the National Football League. So there's options there where the Bears are going to be in a strong position. So J.J. McCarthy, I think he's got a shot to be a high-level pro. Shedeur Sanders, I think, has a chance to be a high-level pro. But if those are the potential guys versus one of those top 2 and the evaluation they're at right now, I think a positional player who you're more confident will be special are where the Bears are better off at this point in their development. And then you allow Justin Fields potentially again. Now, he could fall off a cliff. I don't think he needs to rush back. I don't think the Bears should rush him back. When that thumb is healthy, it's a big final stretch of the season for him. But still, if the Bears don't pick up the 5th-year option, they still have time. And they also could pick up the 5th-year option and give themselves even more time to stockpile talent. Because regardless of who the quarterback is, this is still not a roster that's a quarterback away from championship level football. So I don't think you need to reach for a quarterback right now. You need to reach for exceptional talent, guys who can come in and be immediate impact players.
All right. Well, while you say that, so then let me just finish up with this then. Are Williams and May to you right now, what you've seen from them, and maybe it's just one of them, maybe it's both of them, are they quarterbacks right now that you see like, kind of no matter what Justin Fields does, unless he breaks out MVP level the last half of the season, if it's still kind of the inconsistencies that we've seen where he stacks a couple good games and has a Vikings kind of level game, if we see that Justin Fields the rest of the year, are Williams and May the type of prospects where you say, as much as I love Justin, get a 2nd-round pick for him or whatever you might get for him and move on with Williams or May?
Yeah, I'm not even sure you got to trade him, but I think you can draft one of those QBs and bring them in, and Justin Fields can try to beat them out in camp and just see where it goes from there. It would be nice, the idea of maybe getting something in return for Justin Fields, but if he does continue to be inconsistent for whatever reason, if it's because of the thumb, if it's because of Luke Getsy, it's because of himself, probably some combination of the three. If he's inconsistent the remainder of the season here, then I'm comfortable with the idea of still drafting an exceptional QB talent like either Williams or May would seem to be in one of those top 2 slots, and they just keep Justin Fields on the roster. We see quarterbacks drafted with veterans on the roster all the time. You come in, if Justin's able to beat them out and keep them on the bench, then it would be because he's leading the Bears to success. And if he's not, then you still have your exceptional quarterback talent, and you have a representative backup QB who may be on his way out of town following that season.
All right, well, there he is, Anthony Herron, on Twitter at Big Ant Herron. And, of course, you can watch him on Fox 32, watch him on the Big Ten Network, and, of course, listen to him on 670 The Score, especially on Sundays with the post-game show. And thanks for so much time. Really enjoyed this conversation, and good luck to you the rest of the season.
I appreciate it, Bill. Let's do it again sometime, man.